give you more knuckle.
Hello guys, and welcome to If Life Were an Anime. Today I want to talk about a manga that's so different, so original, and it's considered a cult classic. It's called Shamo, and it's a fighting manga, but it could also be considered a psychological manga. It's more on the adult side of things, and it deals with more serious themes than your average fighting manga. Let me talk to you a little bit about this manga. So the name Shamo, it comes from a breed of rooster that is specially bred for fighting. The symbolism of the name already telling the reader what is the main focus of the manga. So our story centers around a young man in high school, around maybe 16 years old, named Ryo Narushima. For unknown reasons, he ends up stabbing both of his parents, and that's how the manga begins. It's him being introduced into the juvenile prison in Japan, and you know that the crime he just committed is one of the most heinous crimes a person could commit, and one that carries a lot of social condemnation, especially in Japanese society. In any society, killing your parents is pretty bad, but in Japanese society, that is viewed as the biggest taboo. We're not given the reasons why Ryo did what he did, but it is implied by his sister when he visits him in prison that his parents were overbearing, maybe putting too much pressure on him. The sister even said she understands that if Ryo hadn't done that, he would have died himself. She doesn't mean they were physically violent towards him, but there was some sort of pressure or expectation or control that was being exercised over him that just drove him to the edge, and that's why he did what he did. It seems that we are kind of told that it was the only way out that Ryo could find of that situation, but he's never really explained. When the whole manga ends, we are given different ideas of the situation, but it always remains a kind of very personal situation and almost a mystery. Maybe he was justified, maybe he wasn't, we never know. So this manga deals with so many different subjects, like what is the nature of evil? Does society make one evil, or is one born evil? What could be considered evil, and what about the hypocrisy of the people in power? Are those people evil as well? And it's very interesting how this manga deals with these questions. So we start with our protagonist entering the prison. Obviously, everybody already knows what he's in for, so the guards have a grudge against him. The administration of the prison also dislikes him, and the other inmates despise him for his crime. So right from the beginning, this is a middle-class kid thrown into prison with very violent offenders, and he gets tossed into a prison cell with 3 or 4 of the guys, some of whom have several mental problems, others who just want to be violent, and then you also have the abusers. And Ryo gets thrown into prison, and along with him there are also a couple of new inmates, and my god, it's horrible what happens to him in prison. So some older inmates basically take the new guys and just tell them that at midnight they should come to a cell and they will be given an introduction by the older inmates. But what they don't expect is what kind of introduction this is, which is basically all these other inmates pile up on them, beat them up, and do that deed that should never be done to anybody. And this type of abuse that happens to Ryo leaves him traumatized, and he begins to realize and reassess his situation, and he starts thinking, how can I help myself when nobody else is willing to help me? So Ryo cannot go ask for help from the administration. They won't help him, they don't like him, and they don't care for him at all. So the adults are not going to help him, and other inmates are not going to help him. So he has no one to turn to for help except himself. And this is where the real transformation for Ryo begins, because he finally finds an opportunity to defense against his aggressor. He is able to send the aggressor to the hospital, but he knows at one point the aggressor will have to come back. So Ryo starts thinking how to prepare for that. And in the prison, all the inmates, I think once a week, are allowed to take a lesson, and the lesson is about karate. So they bring this other adult inmate from a different prison who will serve as the karate instructor. He is short, bald, and old. He looks unassuming, has a very calm demeanor, but he also has this unsettling look or unsettling appearance. He looks harmless, yet he also looks like he's hiding some secret fierceness. This old man, the first time he lays eyes on Ryo, he sees something in him and he allows him to train karate. And Ryo sucks at first, but through persistence, he gets better and better. So one day, the karate instructor actually allows the original abuser of Ryo to come to the karate class. And the abuser is huge, he's pretty big. And the instructor, who is called Kenji Kurokawa, sets up a fight between them. And Ryo is extremely afraid. But slowly he starts applying the techniques that he was taught, and he manages to overpower the bully, finally taking revenge on him and making sure he cannot harm Ryo again. And as he keeps practicing karate, he becomes stronger and stronger. And there are a lot of other bullies in the prison as well who are very strong, and the administration does not like Ryo. So when they see that he's becoming stronger, and they see that, we don't know what this kid's gonna do once he becomes the strongest. So the prison administration comes up with a plan to kill Ryo and make it look like an accident. They ask the master, Kenji Kurokawa, to basically kill the kid and call it an accident. And they also ask other inmates in the prison to kill Ryo. And so Ryo gets into a lot of fights, but he manages to survive them all. And when Ryo is about to finish his sentence and is close to being released, they set up a fight between Ryo and his master Kenji with the intention to kill Ryo. So he fights his master, but during the fight, although Kenji is really proficient, he's really skillful, he's really tough, we're given a little bit of Kenji's background, which is that he was a political extremist. That's why he got into prison for trying to kill the emperor in an assassination attempt as a political statement. So he's a radical and he's really, really strong, although he doesn't look like it. So Kenji, we know, has an agenda of his own. He's a character that is between the shadows and the light for Ryo. He doesn't seem to have many soft feelings for anybody, not even compassion. At the beginning, even accepting the administration's orders to kill Ryo. But he seems to respect strength and also his martial arts values. So they fight, or they're fighting to the death basically, and Kenji is winning. But he changes his mind. He sees something in Ryo and he spares his life basically, going against the administration orders. And after that fight, Ryo gets released from prison. Once he's out, he has no one and nothing in life. He's basically alone. All his extended family, like uncles, cousins, sister, they have rejected him basically and turned their backs on him. They don't want to hear anything from him. So he only wants to find his sister because he feels guilty that in a way she was shunned as well from society and forced into prostitution because of him. So he wants to find her, but he has no money and no means. So what he decides to do is basically he becomes a male prostitute for women. So his clients are older women that pay him to have sex with him, but he's not really happy about that and he really doesn't enjoy it. So he's working for the Yakuza at this point. But one day he has enough of this and hits a client and tells the mafia boss that he doesn't want to do that anymore. But they can't really control him. He's so strong, and they send people to find him, but he always manages to fight them off. So Ryo makes friends with a drug-addicted girl, and they have a few nights together, and the Yakuza send more guys to go after the girl and attack her. And I don't know if they kill her at the end, but they severely hurt her and do very, very bad things to her. So Ryo finds out and beats the guys up and manages to cut a deal with the Yakuza. And this is the first time that we see Ryo really has no feelings of compassion. I mean, he seems to feel bad for the girl and takes revenge, but besides that, he brushes it off and moves on with very little time spent thinking about the girl. Which, since we know that Ryo himself suffered very similar abuse in prison, we would think that he should feel more compassion for the girl than the average guy. But he doesn't. There's a lot of very serious themes going on in this manga, so after a while we're at a point where Ryo doesn't want to do what he's doing anymore, and he seems to want to fight for a living. He sees a guy on Japanese TV. He's a very famous heavyweight kickboxer, and he feels like that's what he would like to be. He would like to be a professional fighter. So he starts training, and the way he trains is that he finds his old master, the Kenji, and basically finds people that were connected to him, other students of his, or people that were maybe not his direct students but belonged to the same karate dojo or organization, because this dojo basically controls the fighting business in Japan. In Japan, if you know anything about fighting, you know it's a big business, and it's usually managed by a promotion company like Pride, K1 or Dream. And to do business, or the business that they conduct, usually has ties with the Yakuza. So Ryo gets into this kind of karate organization, which has a lot of influence with the media and reporters, and also organizes the biggest events. So he begins hunting fighters as a form of training. He begins to test himself against street fighters or karate fighters that were linked to the dojo. The karate organization doesn't want him because he doesn't fit the profile of a person that could be accepted by the mainstream media. So he's not marketable, and his image, if it gets known that he's a killer of his own parents, it could financially harm the organization. But at the same time, there are other reporters that think that he will make the perfect villain. He will bring in views. So something that they should promote him as the villain. So Ryo manages to get into the organization by blackmailing a reporter who was having intercourse with some dudes. And Ryo manages to capture these in photographs and uses it to blackmail the reporter, and finally he gets accepted into the kickboxing organization. So now he has a chance to fight, and Ryo's karate style is brutal, direct, and focused on self-defense, not really a sport karate. And for him, nothing is out of the rules. He doesn't care if he has to eye poke or kick you in the nuts or do anything dirty to survive. For him, fighting means surviving. So whoever survives wins. So he goes through different opponents, a lot of them which know grappling or wrestling, things that he hasn't trained at all. But he manages to find ways to beat them, and he begins to seek guys to fight from the street, basically, who are very strong as well. And there's one fight that made an impression on me. He fights a guy, and this character, this guy is a Yakuza, is based, I think, an homage to Hanayama Kaoru of the Baki manga, who as well is based on a real-life Japanese Yakuza called Kei Hanagata. So this opponent is huge, with a scar across his face, and at the moment that Ryo confronts him, he's having a drink with a girl at a bar, and he's not very attractive, but the atmosphere that he has is one of strength, of menace. Everyone seems to be afraid of him, and he has a very good reputation in the underworld. So the girl we see that feels is giggling, and she seems to be honored that the guy asked her out. So Ryo interrupts the date and picks a fight with him. And the guy sees Ryo, and just by the looks of him, we know that he knows that Ryo is looking for trouble. And so he accepts the fight. During their fight, at one point, the Yakuza looks seriously at Ryo while they are fighting. And he says something to him. He says, "You have the same look as me." And Ryo responds, "What's that supposed to mean? I wouldn't like to look like you at all." And that Yakuza says, "You have the look of somebody who has never been loved." And we see some panels of his past where the Yakuza was abandoned when he was a baby among a pile of trash. And we assume that he had to grow alone, fighting, very similar to Ryo. He seems that he was abandoned by everybody, rejected by society. And the phrase that he says, "You have a look of somebody who has never been loved," hit me so deep. And we see that Ryo felt it. And I think there is an effect on people when they feel they haven't been loved. That's why that phrase is so powerful. I think that people talk a lot about self-love, self-esteem, but it's hard to grow self-esteem or self-love when there's no outside validation, when nobody has ever told you that you deserve to be loved. I think that the best way to grow self-esteem is to have somebody else love you, and that validation gives you the impulse that you need to start loving yourself. So a person who has never been loved is different. It just is different how you grow up and how you deal with others. So this whole thing, I think, was one of the most interesting ways of letting us know how much a lack of love hurts somebody, maybe sometimes for their entire lives even. And it really touches on a lot of the background of the manga, which is the question of society's rejection, lack of love, how you develop in a society where nobody really cares for each other. So after winning that fight, Ryo starts to train more seriously and manages to beat a lot of different people. And he sets his aim to fight for the heavyweight kickboxing championship of Japan. But Ryo is just a lightweight at most, so he doesn't have the weight or size requirements or the build to even fight at heavyweight. But he starts a very rigorous training regime, and he gets some financial backers as well. And they start investing in him, so he manages to get really good training partners from outside Japan, like from Holland or America. And then he also brings his karate master Kenji, and he also starts injecting steroids like crazy. So he starts using all these substances to get bigger, and the doctor warns him that you're gonna die if you keep up doing this. But he doesn't care. He's obsessed with the idea of fighting at heavyweight and beating the champ, because the champion for Ryo represents the polar opposite of what Ryo is. The champion hasn't done anything personally bad to Ryo, but for some reason Ryo just can't stand him. And that's because this guy is good looking, he's kind, he's respected by the people, he's fair, he's loved, he's really strong and admired by everyone. So I think Ryo feels some type of envy or jealousy towards him. And maybe Ryo thinks that if he had been guided properly, if he had had a supporting family, he would have been a success in life instead of what he is now. Or maybe he could have been spared some of the very bad situations that he had to go through in his life. So Ryo starts preparing for this fight, and I just want to mention that in order to get this fight, Ryo really had to hurt personally the champ. He went after his girlfriend and did something very, very bad to her, which I cannot say on this channel, but was extremely bad. So that finally is the last drop, and the champion accepts the fight and trains really hard. He really wants to kill Ryo and take revenge on his girlfriend. And I think this is one of the best fights I have ever seen in any media. And you know, when you start talking about the best fights in anime and manga, that's a long list. But I think this one makes my top 3 and maybe number 1 as the best fight in all of manga and anime. It's definitely worth a read, and I'm not gonna spoil the result, but Ryo goes through a lot to get to this place. He sacrifices everything, damaging his own body to fight this guy, damaging other people, and he has all the odds against him because the champion is bigger, is better trained. You know, the weight difference and the size difference is really big, as well as the experience. So the manga doesn't end after this fight, because the story of the manga really is following Ryo, who is a fighter, and his journey to become stronger. But Ryo is an evil person. Ryo, you know, he's not a good guy. He's like walking a very thin line between darkness and light. Not only because of the crimes he committed in the past, but also because after he gets released from prison, he keeps committing crimes. He keeps assaulting people, assaulting women. He's filled with hate and rejection, and I think this is so telling of the problems of modern society, because we deal with this situation that what would happen to a person if these kind of things would really have happened to him. How would they cope? And some people manage to overcome these type of traumatic events and rise above them and not return hate for hate. But there are other people who think that, you know, what happens was unfair to them and they cannot let it go. Some will return hate for hate and punch for punch, and even worse. They start maybe thinking that they should take revenge on the whole of society, and because they find society guilty, not only the individuals that harm them, but the whole of society. So I think Ryo's mission in life becomes this one single thought: I will do worse to society than what they have done to me. And we follow him on this journey to see how his story will end. I heard other channels describe this manga as the story of evil Rocky, and I think that's a very accurate description. Like, we get a character who is not really on the good side of things. He's kind of black and white, but more black than white, and we follow him on his journey of self-destruction. And as Ryo meets different people, experiences different things, gets into different fights, we see that all these interactions kind of start making a dent in his armor, in the emotional shield that he has built to protect himself from the world. And a lot of people try very hard to save Ryo from himself. Later in the manga, even there's one guy who is a really kind guy, or has, like, I don't know, a messianic complex. He's very good at arts and dancing, like a prodigy and a millionaire. And he sees Ryo on TV and he gets a vision, like that the vision tells him that his mission in life is to fight Ryo in an MMA fight and save him from himself. And this guy, this rich guy, takes all kinds of personal sacrifices to do so. He quits his dancing career, he quits everything, and uses all his money to train in MMA. And when he builds up this fight against Ryo, and when they finally have the fight, it's very crude and brutal. And at one point, he sees Ryo, he sees his darkness, and he sees him for who he truly is, and all the bad things that he has done, and how that has transformed Ryo. And the compassion that he initially felt for Ryo, it turns into disgust when he is really in front of Ryo. It turns into repulsion and fear, and he gives up on trying to save Ryo. So the whole story of redemption for Ryo that we're waiting for, I'm not sure if it ever happens. I'm not sure if at the end Ryo gets redemption. I think, if I'm honest, I think that he does not get redemption in the way that people expect, but I think that through having to care for somebody else, he finds some kind of salvation, and he's able to show compassion at one point in his life. And that little amount of compassion, I think that is his redemption. I think that he was able to change, maybe not everything, or not in the way that people wanted him to change, but through all of his experiences, he manages to find other reasons for living besides harming people. But this is definitely not a manga for anyone who's not willing to look at these serious subjects in the face and really not turn your eyes away from them. But it's highly recommended. It's one of the most tragic, harsh, and impactful manga I have ever read. I would put it there on the level with Berserk, Vagabond, Gans, because the art is also very beautiful, the story is amazing and very original. It doesn't take the same old roads, the same old tropes of other manga where there's one good guy and one bad guy and everything goes well for the hero. It really doesn't. It really looks at a person, like it looks at Ryo as a real person who in real life would have gone through all these awful experiences, and what would happen to them. How would they turn out on the other side without any illusions? So Shamo to me is the best fighting manga I have ever read. It will give you that feeling that you have when you maybe read Monster or Gans or Inuyashiki for the first time, or Berserk. Yet I do have to say it does have some narrative flaws, but I think there are a few, and whatever fault it has, it doesn't affect the story so much. Another thing I want to talk about Shamo is just briefly talk about the author. So the writer is a screenplay writer who is named Iso Hashimoto. He has written a lot of screenplay for movies, and also he was one of the writers for Akira, the anime classic. So you know that if he's involved, this manga will have quality writing. And there's another person, the artist of the manga is called Akio Tanaka. So it's a duo of creators. One is a writer, another one actually draws the manga. Tanaka has had a lot of experience as an artist in different mangas, so this is a very strong manga in both the art quality and the writing. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the authors who deserve all the praise and respect in the world for bringing this work to life. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Please read Shamo. It's amazing. You'll enjoy it. Thank you.